The obsidian walls of the Supreme Concordance Chamber pulsed with a subtle energy, mirroring the frantic rhythm of Xyler's heart. He, High Arbiter of the Krill, found himself suspended in a sea of incandescent dread, a feeling that had become far too familiar in the last cycle. A holographic projection shimmered before the assembled council, a swirling vortex of star systems and potential threats, but Xyler's gaze was fixed on the single crimson point that blazed with an unnatural intensity, the Sol system. The whispers, the anxieties, the veiled threats that had permeated the chamber for weeks had finally coalesced into a suffocating reality. Humanity had declared themselves. And in the Krill Empire, such a declaration was not greeted with fanfare, but with the chilling certainty of impending conflict. The silence in the chamber was a living thing, thick with the weight of generations of Krill history, a history etched in the battles they had fought, the empires they had devoured, and the shadows they had created. Xyler, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's ethereal lights, shifted uneasily. Around him, the other council members, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful and ruthless species, mirrored his apprehension. The Draken, with their predatory eyes and razor-sharp claws, fidgeted with impatience. The Sylvans, ancient and enigmatic beings composed of living starlight, radiated a cool, almost indifferent aura. The Gorthak, hulking behemoths whose bodies were living fortresses, rumbled with barely suppressed aggression. And then there were the Krill, masters of adaptation and the architects of the Empire, bound by a shared fear that could never truly be expressed. They were united in their dominion but divided by their inherent suspicions. "The reports are inconclusive," Xyler finally intoned, his voice a low, resonant hum that echoed through the chamber. "The human fleet's composition is unorthodox. Their ship designs defy all known principles of efficient warfare. Their energy signatures are anomalous." He paused, allowing the weight of the unknown to settle over the assembly. "And their communication protocols are illogical." A Draken representative, its voice a guttural rasp, spat. "Illogical? What else would we expect? They are primitive, a collection of savage tribes barely a cycle removed from their homeworld. Their technology is crude. Their governance is chaotic." Xyler raised a clawed hand, silencing the Draken. "Perhaps. But their ability to traverse the vast distances between stars so rapidly, to build vessels of such odd configuration, and to possess such a potent energy signature, these are not the marks of a truly primitive species." He glanced towards the Sylvan representative, whose form flickered momentarily. "Sylvan, your analyses?" The Sylvan, its voice a chorus of cosmic whispers, responded. "The human signals are difficult to decipher. They do not conform to any established pattern. They are multifaceted, layered with complexities that defy our comprehension. They hint at levels of processing power we cannot currently fathom. It is as if they are deliberately obscuring their true capabilities." The Gorthak representative, a mountainous being whose presence seemed to compress the very air, grunted, its voice a deep thrumming. "Obscuring? Why? What do they have to hide?" Xyler considered the question. What did humanity have to hide? He had pored over countless reports, analyzed intercepted transmissions, and studied the fragmentary data that trickled in from the edge of the human-occupied space. He saw no simple answer. They were not driven by the same ruthless ambition that fueled the Draken. They did not possess the cold, calculating efficiency of the Krill. They lacked the otherworldly detachment of the Sylvans. They were something else. "Perhaps," Xyler said slowly, choosing his words with care, "they are simply different. Perhaps they operate under principles that we do not understand. Perhaps their motivations are not conquest." The very notion was alien to the Krill. A wave of derision rippled through the chamber. Conquest was the only language the Krill had ever known. "Impossible," the Draken spat. "Survival is the only motivation. Any species capable of interstellar travel must, by definition, be seeking to expand its territory, to acquire resources, to conquer." Xyler shook his head. "We cannot assume that all species adhere to our standards. The human signals, they carry echoes of curiosity, of exploration, of a different type of ambition." The Sylvans emitted another ethereal chorus, like wind chimes played by a distant star. "Their signals also hint at an awareness of something greater, a sense of connection to the universe, a knowledge of the void and what dwells within it." The void. The Krill knew the void all too well. They had navigated its treacherous currents for millennia, always seeking to expand their domain and avoid the threats hidden in the darkness between the stars. The void was a place of horrors, a place where entire civilizations had vanished without a trace, consumed by forces beyond comprehension. The Gorthak representative rumbled. "What do they know of the void? Surely not enough to pose a threat. We are the Krill. We have weathered the storms of space for eons. We are the masters of the cosmos." Xyler knew deep in his core that this was not true. The Krill had mastered the art of war, the science of conquest, but they had never mastered the unknown. And humanity, with its strange ships and even stranger signals, was nothing if not unknown. They were a question mark etched into the fabric of the universe, and the Krill did not like questions they could not answer. "We must proceed with caution," Xyler announced, his voice regaining its authority. "We must gather more information. We must understand the true nature of this human phenomenon. I propose a reconnaissance mission, a stealth probe to observe their activities, to analyze their capabilities, and to determine their true intentions." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Draken, despite its blustering, knew that caution was sometimes necessary. The Sylvans, always patient, inclined their flickering forms in assent. Even the Gorthak, ever wary of weakness, seemed to acknowledge the wisdom of a measured approach. "Agreed," said the Draken, its voice laced with impatience. "But let us not delay. The longer we wait, the more they will learn and the stronger they will become." "Agreed," echoed the Sylvan in its cosmic whisper. "Agreed," grunted the Gorthak. Xyler nodded. The gears of the Krill Empire, grinding and creaking with the weight of centuries, began to turn. A reconnaissance mission would be launched, and the fate of the Krill and perhaps the galaxy would hinge on what they discovered about the humans. He closed his eyes, the image of the crimson sun and the Sol system burning behind his eyelids. He knew with a chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. Weeks bled into months. The Krill reconnaissance probe, a stealth vessel equipped with the most advanced sensors the Empire could muster, drifted silently at the edge of the Sol system. The data it sent back to the Supreme Concordance Chamber painted a confusing picture. The human activities were peculiar. They were constructing massive structures in orbit around their home planet, structures that seemed to defy any practical purpose. They were sending out wave after wave of communication signals, complex and interwoven, that the Krill cryptographers struggled to decipher. They were exploring the other planets in their system with relentless energy, their probes and spacecraft flitting through the system like metallic insects. The data presented by the probe was a puzzle that Xyler struggled to solve. The human vessels seemed to be designed more for speed and maneuverability than for firepower. Their weapon systems were unconventional, relying on energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, rather than the devastating plasma weaponry favored by the Krill. Their shields were effective, but they appeared to be vulnerable to certain frequencies of energy, a weakness that the Krill could potentially exploit. But the most perplexing aspect of the human behavior was their interactions with each other. The data stream contained information on their cultures, their social structures, their philosophies, and their governance. It was messy, it was disorganized, it was inefficient, yet there was a sense of cooperation, a willingness to work together that was almost unheard of among the disparate species of the Krill Empire. Xyler reviewed a report on a human broadcast that his cryptographers had managed to partially decipher. The humans were debating complex philosophical concepts that seemed to revolve around concepts like justice, equality, and freedom. These concepts were so alien to the Krill that they were almost meaningless. "What is freedom?" Xyler questioned a holographic projection of the human broadcast. "It is not a factor in survival. It is not something to be sought." The holographic human, a woman with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to defy the cold vacuum of space, looked at him with an inscrutable expression. "Freedom," the human said, her voice filled with something that sounded suspiciously like passion, "is the right to choose your own path. It is the ability to make your own decisions, to shape your own destiny. It is the very essence of what it means to be alive." Xyler could not comprehend such a sentiment. The Krill were bound by their roles, their duties, their place within the rigid hierarchy of the Empire. They had no freedom and they did not want it. They had stability, order, and control, the pillars on which their civilization was built. "How can a species survive without order?" Xyler questioned, directing his words at the holographic human. "Chaos leads to collapse, and collapse leads to annihilation." The human woman's smile widened. "Chaos," she said, "can also lead to growth, to innovation, to the discovery of new possibilities. It is the crucible in which we forge ourselves." Xyler was silent. He did not know how to reconcile what he was seeing, what he was hearing, with his understanding of the universe. The humans were a contradiction, a paradox wrapped in an enigma. They were illogical, unpredictable, and yet they were fascinating. Another Krill Council meeting was called. The tension in the Supreme Concordance Chamber was even thicker than before, a palpable weight that threatened to suffocate those gathered. The Draken were growing restless, their claws tapping impatiently against the obsidian floor. The Sylvans remained aloof and enigmatic, their thoughts shrouded in cosmic mystery. The Gorthak rumbled with anticipation, eager to test the humans' mettle in combat. Xyler had gathered all of the available data, and he knew that a decision had to be made. They could strike first, unleashing the full fury of the Krill war machine upon the unsuspecting humans. They could wait, gathering more information, trying to unravel the mysteries that shrouded the human civilization. Or they could attempt diplomacy. The humans, Xyler began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, are an anomaly. Their behavior is unpredictable. Their intentions are unclear. Their technology, while not as advanced as ours, is surprisingly capable. The Draken, unable to contain its impatience, spat. Unclear, we know enough, they are a threat. Eliminate them now before they become a greater danger. But how much do we truly know? Xyler countered. We have seen their weapons, their ships, their structures, their communications, but we have not seen their society. We do not know what drives them, what they truly desire. The Sylvan, its voice a celestial whisper, interjected. They are different. They are not driven by the same hunger that consumes the Draken, nor the same cold calculation that defines the Krill. They seem to possess a compassion, a capacity for empathy that is foreign to us. The Draken scoffed. Empathy, a weakness, a flaw. They will be crushed beneath the weight of their own sentimentality. Xyler, ignoring the Draken's outburst, continued, I propose that we attempt a first contact, a diplomatic mission. We will send a delegation bearing gifts, offering trade, seeking understanding. A wave of shock rippled through the chamber. The Draken representatives roared in protest. The Gorthak rumbled with incredulity. The very notion of diplomacy with a species as enigmatic as the humans was unthinkable to many of the Krill. You would negotiate with them? The Draken hissed, its eyes narrowed in suspicion. You would offer them terms, you would treat with them as equals. Perhaps, Xyler said calmly. Perhaps they are more capable than we believe. Perhaps they can teach us something. The Sylvan spoke again, its celestial whisper hinting at cosmic prophecy. The humans, they have an ancient knowledge. They have stared into the abyss, and they have seen things that we have not. They are connected to something greater than themselves, something that could be of value to us all, even to the Krill. The Draken's eyes narrowed. I cannot trust this. This smells of weakness. Xyler looked at the assembled council. He saw fear, mistrust, and anger, but he also saw a flicker of curiosity, a hint of hope. He knew that the Krill, despite their ruthless ambition, were always driven by pragmatism. If there was a chance that the humans could offer them some advantage, they would consider it. The decision is not mine alone, Xyler stated, his voice ringing through the chamber. The council will vote. The fate of the Krill and perhaps the galaxy hangs in the balance. The vote was taken. The Krill, despite their mistrust and their fears, were pragmatic. The majority, driven by the desire for knowledge and the potential for advantage, voted in favor of a diplomatic mission. Xyler, his heart pounding in his chest, realized that he had just made a decision that could change everything. The diplomatic vessel, a sleek and elegant ship designed to appear non-threatening, was dispatched towards the Sol system. Inside the ship were Xyler's most trusted advisors and diplomats. Krill knew that the mission would be dangerous, that the humans might respond with hostility. They were prepared for anything. As the ship emerged from hyperspace into the vicinity of the Sol system, the crew held their breath. They were met with the sight of a system teeming with activity. Human spacecraft of various shapes and sizes moved between the planets, constructing space stations and exploring the surrounding stars. Xyler's sensors detected the human fleet's presence, but they made no move to attack. Their vessels held their positions, watching the Krill vessel with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The Krill prepared a greeting, a message of peace written in the universal language of mathematics, but the humans surprised them. A human vessel, clearly designed for diplomacy, moved towards the Krill ship. The human craft, smaller than the Krill vessel but elegant in its design, approached, its exterior bearing a simple message. Welcome. The Krill, accustomed to elaborate protocols and the posturing of war, were taken aback. They had prepared for an attack, for negotiation, but not for welcome. The Krill vessel docked with the human ship, and a team of human representatives, led by a woman named Eleanor Vance, greeted them. Vance was an elderly human, her face etched with wrinkles that told a story of a life lived. Her eyes were warm and inviting, her smile gentle. The Krill delegation entered the human ship. Ship's interior was unlike anything the Krill had ever encountered. It was bright, spacious, and filled with a sense of warmth and comfort. The Krill were offered comfortable seating and refreshments, a gesture of hospitality that they found both puzzling and disarming. Welcome to our humble vessel, Vance said, her voice filled with a genuine warmth that was foreign to the Krill. We are honored to receive guests from a new world. Xyler, still awestruck, managed to respond, his voice a low, resonant hum. We are honored to be here, though the concept of humble is something we are not familiar with. Vance smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. We have much to learn from each other. The two delegations began to converse. The Krill, initially hesitant and cautious, found themselves drawn into the humans' easy manner. The humans, in turn, were fascinated by the Krill, eager to learn about their history, their culture, and their technology. The humans offered the Krill access to their databases, containing knowledge on everything from biology and medicine to astronomy and engineering. They shared their philosophical ideas, their arts and their music, their histories and their values. In return, the Krill shared the wealth of their technological achievements, their understanding of space, and the complex mechanics of survival. As the talks progressed, the Krill began to comprehend the true nature of humanity. The humans were not simply a primitive species, as they had initially believed. They were a civilization built on the principles of cooperation, empathy, and a deep understanding of the universe. They had developed their technology to push forward the limits of human existence. They had also, as the Krill had observed, encountered something else. "We have been exploring the cosmos for a very long time," Vance said, her expression serious. "We have seen things that would shatter your minds. Have met species both benevolent and malevolent, but there is a threat, a shadow, that looms over all." Xyler leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Explain." "We have discovered an ancient signal," Vance continued, her voice low and grave. "A signal originating from a time before the universe was even born. It's been reaching out, spreading across the galaxy for eons." "A signal?" Xyler questioned. "What kind of signal?" "It's a warning," Vance answered. "The Black Armada." The Krill grew still. The Black Armada. The name echoed a legend, a nightmare whispered through the void, a force of unparalleled power and unimaginable destruction, a threat that had consumed countless civilizations and driven countless others to their doom. The Krill had never encountered it directly, but they knew of the Black Armada's presence, the trails of destruction it had left across the galaxy. It was a force of pure entropy, a relentless tide of annihilation that erased everything in its path. "We understand the threat," Xyler said gravely. "We know of the shadow that casts itself on our shared future. Why are you telling us this?" Vance looked at Xyler, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and determination. "Because we need your help. We believe that we are not alone in the universe, and we are not alone in this fight." The next few cycles were filled with collaboration. The Krill and the humans, despite their cultural differences and their past misunderstandings, began to work together. They shared their knowledge, their resources, and their technologies. They developed new weapons and strategies, and they prepared for the inevitable arrival of the Black Armada. The Krill, under the guidance of Xyler, began to rethink their role in the galaxy. They had always focused on conquest and control, but now they saw a different path, a path of cooperation and survival. They had a reason to stand for something more. The Draken, the Sylvans, and the Gorthak initially resisted this new alliance. They still clung to their old ways, their old prejudices. They saw the humans as a threat, a weakness, a barrier to their power. But the combined efforts of the Krill and the humans, combined with a shared fear of the Black Armada, slowly began to wear down their resistance. The threat was too real, too encompassing. The possibility of destruction was too great. Then the Black Armada arrived. It came not as a single fleet, but as a tide of darkness, an unstoppable wave of destruction that blotted out the stars. Ships that defied the laws of physics, weapons that erased planets from existence, and an army of entities that were beyond comprehension. It was a spectacle of cosmic horror, a testament to the universe's capacity for destruction. The first battle took place above the Sol system. Human and Krill vessels fought side by side, their combined might a flickering beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. Human ships with their agile designs and energy weapons darted in and out of the Armada's reach, drawing fire away from the Krill's larger and more heavily armed cruisers. The Krill's plasma weaponry tore through the Armada's ranks, but they were met with alien resistance. The Black Armada's ships, seemingly immune to their attacks, continued to push forward. Ships were destroyed and others fell, but the humans' ships continued to press the attack. The humans, their faces grim but their voices clear, communicated to Xyler. "It is time." Xyler knew what was meant, and his heart sank. The Krill were ready to sacrifice themselves, if need be, to protect their new allies. He had watched the human ships with their unusual strategies and their unwavering resolve. Now they were going to do what was necessary. The human fleet, along with the Krill, executed a maneuver they had prepared, a risky plan that had been refined for years. The human ships, in a final display of cooperation, activated their drives and formed a single, massive formation, a wall of energy that radiated a power that was almost blinding. "What are they doing?" a Krill captain shouted over the comms, his voice filled with panic. The human ships, working together, poured every ounce of their energy into one precise blast. "They are giving us time," Xyler said with a solemn tone as he watched the ships. The combined force of the human fleet, A final act of self-sacrifice unleashed a torrent of energy directly towards the Black Armada, creating a massive wave that tore through the encroaching forces. The Armada's advance was momentarily halted, its momentum disrupted. But it was only a moment. The sacrifice of the human fleet had bought the Krill time. The Krill forces, using this window of opportunity, launched a counteroffensive. They struck deep into the heart of the Armada, engaging its forces in close-quarters combat. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. The Krill fought with a ferocity they had never known before, fueled by grief, by anger, and by the knowledge that they were fighting for something more than survival. The other species, the Draken, the Sylvans, and the Gorthak, seeing the selfless act of humanity and the Krill's determination, put aside their reservations and joined the battle. The Krill had shown the galaxy how to fight and how to defend. The galaxy's greatest species fought with a unity that the Armada could not understand. The tide of battle began to turn. The combined forces of the Krill and the other species, fighting together as one, pushed back the tide of darkness. They struck at the Armada's weak points, exploiting the gaps in its defenses. They used their combined knowledge and resources to develop new weapons, new strategies, and new technologies. The Krill had never seen a battle like this, an effort that brought together the species against something much larger. The Black Armada, caught off guard by this unexpected resistance, began to falter. Its advance slowed, its forces scattered. The Krill, emboldened by their success, pushed their advantage, driving the Armada back into the void from whence it had come. The battle raged for cycles. Entire planets were destroyed, galaxies were ravaged, and the very fabric of space-time was torn asunder. But against all odds, the combined forces of the Krill and the other species, led by the legacy of the fallen humans, prevailed. The Black Armada was defeated, driven back into the darkness. The galaxy was saved, at least for now. After the battle, a new era dawned. The Krill, forever changed by their encounter with humanity, began to embrace the values of cooperation and understanding. The other species, humbled by their shared experience, began to put aside their old rivalries. An alliance was formed, a grand coalition of species dedicated to the preservation of life and the defense of the galaxy. Xyler, standing in the Supreme Concordance Chamber, gazed out at the stars, reflecting on all that had transpired. He thought of the humans, of their courage, of their sacrifice, and of the legacy they had left behind. They had shown the Krill a new path, a path of hope and unity. They had changed them. He knew that the war was not truly over. The Black Armada would inevitably return. But this time the galaxy was prepared. The Alliance had built new defenses, developed new technologies, and forged new bonds. They were ready. The Krill had studied the humans' message, and they were beginning to understand the deeper implications of the warning. The Black Armada was not just a threat to the galaxy. It was a symptom of something far more profound, something that went to the heart of the universe itself. The Krill, guided by the wisdom of the humans, had begun their own exploration of the void. They had discovered ancient artifacts, hidden messages, and forgotten technologies. They had begun to understand the nature of the Black Armada, its origins, and its purpose. They were ready for the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Xyler closed his eyes, and a single tear, unheard of for a Krill, traced a path down his chitinous cheek. He reflected on the long, winding path that had led him here, a path that had taken him from a life of conquest to a life of cooperation, from a life of fear to a life of hope. He opened his eyes, and his gaze fell upon the hollow projection of the Sol system, the crimson sun of the human home world. He had a deep respect for the humans who had showed him that survival and prosperity can come in multiple forms. A new message, a deep hum in the void, had begun to emanate from the Sol system. This message wasn't for the Krill. A new wave of Krill Council members rushed to Xyler's side. "Arbiter," shouted a Krill captain, "we've intercepted a new signal from the Sol system." Xyler turned to face the captain. His voice was a stern tone. "What is it?" "It's coming from their homeworld," the captain answered. "It's a transmission, a code. Their ships are moving toward it." Xyler knew what this meant. He gazed at the Sol system once more. "What does it say?" The captain looked at his screen. He spoke as the lights shifted colors. "We have entered the battle. The Black Armada stirs once more." The Krill looked at the message and then looked at each other. They would have to be ready.